The town of Oakhaven didn't wake up so much as it slowly exhaled. By 5 a.m., the Nebraska mist clung to the storefronts along Main Street, turning the sleepy town into a charcoal sketch. 5 miles away, the Oasis station sat at the edge of the map, a glowing white tooth in a dark mouth. Before the first rays of morning could reach the highway, Chris had to address the back bathroom. It was a small windowless room behind the soda fountain, and tonight the mess went far beyond standard wear and tear. Whatever the entity had left in aisle 4 was only part of the breach. The rest had seeped through the plumbing. The tile floor was coated in a dark, shimmering grime that clung to the porcelain and smelled of cold iron and damp earth, a residue that regular soap wouldn't even touch. Chris set his bucket down with a heavy thud, pulling thick rubber gloves up over his forearms. Cleaning was supposed to be simple. You applied bleach, you scrubbed, and the world went back to being presentable. But in a place where the static crept through the floorboards, keeping things clean was an endless battle against a tide that refused to follow the rules of normal grease and grime. Every time he wiped a surface clear, the shadows in the corners seemed to reach out, trying to smear it again. As he plunged his scrub brush into the salt and bleach solution, his mind drifted back 20 years. 20 years ago, Chris had believed that fixing things was straightforward. He had been a 20-year-old medical student, his days consumed by textbooks and rounds at Gray Hollow Manor, a quiet care facility on the edge of the city. He had taken the work because he wanted to help people, to clean up the messes left by illness, to restore order to broken bodies. He was the student who stayed late to adjust bed frames, who sanitized countertops twice, and who listened when elderly patients complained about things no one else could see. The tipping point hadn't come from a medical failure. It had come from a realization that human medicine couldn't cure a room when the room itself was decaying. It was a rainy Tuesday in room 302. Chris was changing the linens for an elderly patient when the sterile atmosphere began to break down. The smell of antiseptic was suddenly swallowed by a heavy, swampy stench. The shadow under the bed didn't stay on the floor. It began to creep up the wall like spilled ink, thick and cold, coating the medical equipment in a film that defied every disinfectant in the building. Chris had tried to clean it. He had grabbed towels, scrubs, anything he could find, trying desperately to wipe away the dark residue before it reached the patient. But the harder he worked, the more the static fought back. The residue wasn't just dirty. It was alive, a physical manifestation of something thin and wrong trying to enter the room. He had reached out to pull the patient away, and the ice-cold shock of that contact had settled deep in his bones. He realized then that medicine was just painting over the mold. If you didn't address the corruption behind the walls, all the care in the world wouldn't keep the room clean. He dropped out of his program shortly after, spent 2 years drifting, and ended up in a cluttered garage behind a rental house in Oakhaven under the hum of a single hanging bulb. If the world was going to keep leaking, he needed better tools than scrub sponges and antiseptics. Chris remembered the night he built the Maglite. He had taken a heavy-duty aluminum flashlight, stripped it down to its bare shell, and laid the pieces out like surgical instruments. He had spent weeks searching local scrap yards for a specific grade of heavy brass, turning it on a hand lathe until he had crafted a thick, reinforced ring to press around the head of the light. It gave the tool a lethal, balanced weight, something heavy enough to physically hold his ground if he needed it. The real work, though, was the lens. He had sourced a piece off dense obsidian glass, grinding and polishing it until it shone like a dark mirror. He didn't fully understand the physics, only that when the flashlight's beam passed through volcanic glass, the light shifted to a searing violet frequency, a light that didn't just illuminate darkness, but burn away the oily static residue left by things that didn't belong. He sealed the entire unit with silver solder to ensure the internal wiring stayed protected against whatever dampness the static brought with it. A bright chime echoed from the front of the store, pulling Chris back to the present. The bathroom floor was finally clear, the black residue neutralized into a thin, harmless ash that washed easily down the drain. Chris rinsed his mop, peeled off his gloves, and walked out to the counter. Sarah, the owner of Oak Haven's local bakery, stood by the register, setting a small white box of fresh pastries on the counter. "Morning, Chris," Sarah said warmly, glancing at his damp apron and tired eyes. "You look like you've been doing deep cleaning again." "Just keeping the place presentable," Chris said, sliding a fresh cup of black coffee toward her. "The usual?" "Always," she smiled, taking a sip. "You know, people in town wonder why you stay out here on the edge of Highway 42, working the shift nobody else wants. Don't you ever get tired of scrubbing the same floors every night?" Chris looked down at the counter, his hand resting near the knurled grip of the brass maglite tucked safely beneath the register. "Sometimes," Chris said softly, "but if somebody doesn't keep the line clean, the mess spreads." "Quiet is worth the work, Sarah?" She nodded, not quite understanding the full weight of his words, but trusting the quiet confidence in his voice. As she headed out the door into the cool morning mist, Chris picked up his rag one last time, wiping down the counter until the chrome shone spotless against the fading dark.